Hello, my fellow subjects of the internet out there. This is the Aromantic Shipper back again with yet another video. And this time I'm going to be talking about The Walking Dead. I know, right? Finally, it's been a year and a half since I uploaded my last Walking Dead rewrite video. Real talk though, for any of my subscribers who did not watch my New Year's update video, which is quite a lot of you, I am not going to be continuing my Walking Dead rewrite series. I know, it's disappointing because a lot of people seem to like them, but ultimately, after procrastinating for so long, the project just became too bloated, and I became interested in working on other stuff, and I've just gotten busier and busier recently. Also, as time has gone by and I've improved my content, I've really found myself not liking my Walking Dead rewrites very much. I mean, a lot of the changes I still stand by, and I think the majority of my alterations really would have improved the show, but other things, I really question what the hell I was thinking. Like, I tried to make Jadis a more sympathetic character, but I also had her basically rape Scott and play it off as a joke, and then have her kill Scott? Like, what the fuck? And I feel like I was trying too hard to be super dark and edgy. Like, I had Maggie's baby die for no reason except to make things even more depressing. Also, all of my Walking Dead rewrite videos were recorded in a single take with one single image overlaid because at the time my cheap-ass phone didn't have the storage to edit long videos. Whatever, my point is the Walking Dead rewrites were just not something I was really that invested in continuing. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm never going to talk about the series again. I mean, I still have a passing fascination with the show, you know, if the moment ever strikes me again in the future, who knows, but if I really am never going to talk about The Walking Dead again, after being a fan of the franchise for so many years and sinking so much of my time and energy into it, I figured I could at least cobble together a video talking about the series after it ended. I know I'm late to the party because it ended like 8 months ago, but whatever. I waited for the final season to come out on Netflix to watch, and I procrastinated writing the script, so sue me. But yeah, this video is going to be me talking about my thoughts on the last 3 seasons of The Walking Dead that I didn't cover in my rewrites, as well as answering the eternal question, when was the day The Walking Dead died? In my opinion. Also, general spoiler warning for The Walking Dead AMC show and the comic, and also for Fear the Walking Dead. You have been warned. No, but for real, it's kind of become a meme in the Walking Dead community by now, after entertaining the Elks video 5 years ago, with him even coming out with a follow-up video, the day The Walking Dead died again, like 3 months ago. But yeah, there's this obsession in the Walking Dead fandom trying to point out exactly when The Walking Dead fell from grace, from being one of the most popular and acclaimed shows on television, to basically a laughingstock that no one cares about anymore. And depending on who you talk to, you'll get wildly different answers, because there isn't really a well-agreed-upon consensus on when The Walking Dead truly declined. Some people think it was always bad, others think Season 3 ruined the show, others think Season 5 was when it truly got bad, some claim Season 7 was the true downfall, and some people, a lot of people, think that Season 8 was what truly killed the show. So what do I think? Well, I think that The Walking Dead has always had problems ever since its first season, but its problems definitely became more noticeable, more numerous, and more intrusive to the story as the show kept going on. In my personal opinion, the show's quality kept improving from Season 1 to Season 4, and then kind of wobbled after that. Season 5 has a great beginning, a great ending, and then a whole lot of kind of boring meandering in the middle. Season 6 is quite honestly still my favorite season of The Walking Dead. It has its fair share of problems, sure, but it has by far some of my favorite episodes and moments in the series. And outside of episodes 5 and 6, it manages to keep the story at a brisk pace. There is a ton of great action, a ton of great character moments. The fight against the Walker herd and the build-up to the introduction of Negan were handled pretty much perfectly. And you know what? Here's Not Here was fucking great. Change my mind. Season 7 was a fucking disaster, and easily the worst The Walking Dead had sunk to that point. But you know what? Even with its many glaring issues, there are still things in Season 7 that deserve to be praised. The season premiere is still a contender for the best episode in the series, and there are other episodes in the season that are pretty good, like Hostiles and Calamities. And Negan was an incredibly engaging and charismatic antagonist all the way through. And despite The Walking Dead sinking to some embarrassing lows in Season 7, it still managed to greatly improve itself with Season 8, which is still my third favorite season in the entire show. Yeah, people can laugh at me all they want, but my opinion has not changed. Season 8 was still a great season of The Walking Dead that got way too much hate. I mean, there were still some significant problems. One in particular was universally despised by the entire fan base. And look, I still hold the same opinion I expressed in my Season 8 rewrite video. Carl's death absolutely could have worked, with Judith still being alive in the show to be able to take Carl's place in the epilogue from the comics. Carl dying as a direct result of the war Rick started would have been a shocking work of brilliance that would have served the narrative and the characters and made Rick's decision to save Negan at the end of the season that much more meaningful. It also pays off Morgan's speech to Rick in the Season 3 episode Clear, where he told Rick that Carl was going to die. But the way the show decided to kill Carl off, just being bitten by some random walker, long after walkers have stopped being a serious threat, was so monumentally stupid. However, I really think that people who try to tear down Season 8 as the worst thing to ever happen to The Walking Dead are just obsessively narrowing in on Carl's terribly written death and the other flaws the season has, while ignoring so many of the fantastic aspects about Season 8. The season is chock full of high adrenaline action scenes, a lot of which are very impressive. Dwight and Eugene somehow became all-star characters this season. Simon is easily one of the best additions to the show that never appeared in the comics and makes the whole conflict so much more engaging and unpredictable. And the writing for both Negan and Rick, as the two come to head-to-head this season, is absolute peak quality. Also, the boring garbage people from last season were all massacred, thank goodness. It felt like all of the slow, tedious build-up from Season 7 was actually paying off in mostly satisfying ways. So yeah, despite its flaws, I don't think Season 8 killed The Walking Dead, nor do I think Season 7 did, or any point before that. In my opinion, the day The Walking Dead died was on April 15th, 2018. What happened on April 15th, 2018? Well, it was the day after The Walking Dead Season 8 finale aired, and it was also the day that Fear the Walking Dead Season 4 premiere aired. So, I know what you're thinking. What does that have to do with The Walking Dead? Well, my friend, everything. But first, some background. For those of you who have only watched The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead was a spin-off of The Walking Dead set in the same universe that started airing its first season on August 23, 2015, in between seasons 5 and 6 of The Walking Dead, when the franchise was pretty much at the height of its popularity. And it wasn't really all that great. I mean, it wasn't bad, and there were some good aspects. The camera quality and color saturation were an improvement for one thing. This show looked pretty. But Season 1 of the series was pretty clearly inferior to Season 1 of The Walking Dead when you compare the two side by side. It's actually kind of ironic because when I first wanted to start watching The Walking Dead in 2015, my first exposure to the franchise was watching Season 1 of Fear the Walking Dead as it was airing. And the entire time I thought I was watching The Walking Dead and was so confused, wondering when Rick was finally going to make an appearance. But anyway, even though Season 1 of Fear the Walking Dead was just kind of okay, it did show some signs of improvement in Season 2 and had some genuinely really good moments, sandwiched between some pretty boring stuff as well, but, give and take. I may not have been the biggest fan of the series, but I still had respect for it, because the show didn't feel like it was trying to ride off The Walking Dead's coattails. It was set in the same universe, but it was its own separate thing, with completely different characters in a completely different setting that never tried to pull in viewers by having a bunch of references and cameos from the Walking Dead series, and it was starting to do genuinely different, interesting things with some of its characters and plotlines that set it apart from The Walking Dead. The show had potential, is what I'm saying, and in Season 3, that potential was on full display for all to witness. Suddenly, in 2017, Fear the Walking Dead was getting massive praise heaped upon it, and for good reason, because Season 3's quality was in a different world compared to Seasons 1 and 2. I mean, Season 3 still had problems like killing off Travis so early on for no reason, just after he started to get really interesting at the end of last season, But all things considered, Season 3 was one hell of an incredible ride, moving at a brisk pace, never feeling like an episode was wasted or uninteresting. There were a ton of new, super interesting additions, like the Otto family. The storylines were incredibly engaging, the season finale was incredibly intense, if maybe a bit rushed, and episode 4 of the season was simply incredible, and easily makes the top 10 list for best episodes in the whole franchise. Season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead was leagues better in nearly every way to Season 7 of The Walking Dead, which had just aired beforehand. After 2 mediocre seasons, it really seemed like Fear the Walking Dead had finally found its footing and had grown beyond its reputation as the inferior stepchild of The Walking Dead. And then it happened. The news broke that Morgan Jones from The Walking Dead would be appearing in Fear the Walking Dead. And initially, this announcement was pretty exciting for a lot of Walking Dead fans. But not for me. I personally thought it was the absolute worst decision AMC could possibly make and would not work at all. Fear the Walking Dead had created its own identity, and after Season 3, the series had proven it could stand on its own without having anything to do with The Walking Dead. Morgan was a good character, but he had absolutely nothing to do with the story and characters of Fear the Walking Dead. I mean, for crying out loud, The Walking Dead was set in Virginia, and Fear the Walking Dead was set in fucking Mexico. But on top of that, Fear the Walking Dead was taking place 2 years before the current timeline of The Walking Dead, and Season 3 ended on a cliffhanger. So if Morgan was going to be brought over to Fear the Walking Dead, then that would require a massive time jump, completely dropping the story arc that had been set up in Season 3. This was the most blatant corporate overreach I had ever witnessed, and a pitifully desperate attempt to pull in more Walking Dead viewers to the sister series. All logic had been completely thrown out the window just for the sake of getting Morgan Jones over to Fear the Walking Dead. And my fears about Fear were 100% correct. The Season 4 premiere of Fear the Walking Dead, in fairness, was actually a fairly good episode by itself. However, I knew that after I watched it, that Fear the Walking Dead was gone. It was dead. In its place, we were watching the Morgan Jones show. Now Morgan was the main character, despite not having anything to do with the first 3 seasons of the show. And all the characters from Fear the Walking Dead were just side characters, meant to further his arc, if they weren't killed off immediately because they were taking too much focus away from our precious Morgan. The Season 4 premiere was a complete slap in the face to any fans of Fear the Walking Dead, and didn't even make any sense from a marketing perspective. Because sure, you might pull some fans from The Walking Dead over to Fear by having Morgan show up, but you also confuse the hell out of Fear the Walking Dead fans who aren't watching the main show and have no idea why the series just went through a massive jump forward in time, having the entire premiere episode focus on some rando who they've never seen before. But as if it wasn't bad enough that this decision completely ruined the story Fear the Walking Dead had originally been telling, this new story that the show was running with was fucking atrocious! After the Season 4 premiere, there would not be a single good episode of Fear the Walking Dead for 31 more episodes! The show had gone from a relatively grounded, high-stakes drama to a fucking campy adventure story with no stakes at all after Nick died. I mean, look at the cover art for Season 5. It's ridiculous. And Morgan became a complete idiot that did nothing but preach to the audience about how violence ain't the way every single episode. Also, they started using a dirt gray filter effect for every scene except flashbacks. Why? Seasons 4 and 5 of Fear look ugly as fuck. Season 6 of Fear was, in fairness, an improvement over the complete shit heaps that were Seasons 4 and 5, and it did have some good episodes. The writers seemed like they were at least putting some effort into making the show again, but at the same time, it still wasn't all that great. I have not yet watched Season 7 of the series, but looking at the reviews it's gotten, I think it's safe to say the series has now gone back to being as bad or even worse than Seasons 4 and 5. And even if the 8th and final season currently airing somehow manages to be the greatest piece of fiction ever produced, I just have no interest in giving the show any more of my time. I'm done. I don't care anymore. This show is dead. I mean, if you think The Walking Dead got bad, believe me, any decline in the quality of The Walking Dead is nothing compared to what happened to Fear the Walking Dead. So was it worth it, AMC executives? Was a brief jump in ratings worth running the entire show into the ground and making everyone despise it? Well, anyway, you all watching this video might be wondering why I have spent so much time talking about the death of Fear the Walking Dead when I am supposed to be talking about the death of The Walking Dead. Well, it's because, dear viewer, the death of Fear the Walking Dead was also the death of The Walking Dead, in my opinion. Morgan Jones leaving The Walking Dead to go and ruin Fear also had devastating implications for the main show, and those implications may not have been obvious to everyone at first due to the fact that Season 9 was actually pretty good. Now, I didn't agree with some people's sentiments that it was a redemption for the show, since, as I said before, I like Season 8, and I honestly think it's a little better than Season 9, because Season 9 still has its fair share of problems. Michonne supposedly has Alexandria on lockdown, but lets her 10-year-old adopted daughter roam around outside the walls every other episode? What? Not to mention the first 5 episodes were extremely rushed, and the Savior plotline was completely dropped. But hey, while rushed, they were still good, and the Whisperers were handled so well in this season. Better than the comic, in my opinion. Like, Beta was introduced much earlier on and had a really cool fight scene with Daryl in the high-rise. Speaking of Daryl, he is the most interesting in Season 9 that he has been in a very long time, and his backstory completely complements Lydia's in a way no character from the comics could. Season 10 also did a pretty good job with the Whisperers, and once again did a better job with the storyline than the comic book, in my opinion, for the most part. Carol getting the better of Alpha using Negan's help was an absolute joy to watch play out, and a great twist. But after Alpha's death, there are 3 fairly pointless episodes that are just there to fill time before episode 16, and while episode 16 was a good conclusion to the Whisperers storyline, then, of course, you have the 6 bonus episodes that aired after what was supposed to be the finale due to COVID restrictions, which were all fairly boring and pointless, well, except for Here's Negan, which was really great. For real, Negan turned into the best character in the damn show by the end of the series, and I can't tell whether I should be impressed or depressed by that. And then we get to Season 11, which in my opinion, after thinking on it for a spell, barely surpassed Season 7 as the worst season of the whole series. And it wasn't Game of Thrones' final season levels of bad, not even close. And it did have some good things in it and some good episodes. The Commonwealth arc was adapted pretty well, sort of. I always felt that the Commonwealth arc in the comics was extremely rushed and underwhelming. I liked that the final season took more time with it. I liked that it had more going on, and there was much more of an actual conflict. I liked the expanded role of Hornsby, until he became a complete joke, and I thought that Mercer and Stephanie were much stronger characters with better arcs compared to their comic book counterparts. But man, that first third of the season dragged its feet the whole way through in what might be the most useless original story arc in the show ever to be conceived. While there were some entertaining moments and fights, and it was cool to see Maggie and Negan forced to work together, it was so obvious that it only existed to pad the story out. And why? What did it accomplish? Nothing that couldn't have been done in tandem with the Commonwealth storyline, that's for sure. The Reapers accomplished absolutely nothing and only ever killed disposable wastes of space that had just been introduced as part of Maggie's group that the audience doesn't give a shit about. The show did not need to introduce more characters and plot lines by this point. It was already chock full of them. If it was truly necessary to introduce disposable villains at the beginning of Season 11 to give the show some action and serve as a jumping-off point to introduce Maggie back as a member of the main cast again, then just do a 3-episode mini-arc, like with the cannibals at the beginning of Season 5. But the show stretches out the Reaper storyline for 9 episodes! Technically even longer because Leah comes back into the story later to try to wipe out Hilltop before Daryl kills her. Why? Who cares about Leah? Daryl didn't even fucking care about Leah. She is unbelievably boring, and she ruined my Daryl Dixon Arrow Ace headcanon, which is unforgivable. And then when the show starts to focus more on the actual main conflict with the Commonwealth, it is just robbed of so much tension because the Commonwealth soldiers are incompetent buffoons who get mowed down one after the other. Previous villains like Negan and the Whisperers actually killed major characters in the show to establish them as credible threats and make it feel like no one was safe around them. But the Commonwealth soldiers never even kill off any minor characters. Not once! Overall, Season 11 never managed to reach any of the highs that any of the previous seasons did. It just meandered on episode after episode of passable quality until the season finale. And oh, the season finale. Oh, we'll get to that. But before we do, allow me to finally explain why every major issue with the last 3 seasons of The Walking Dead can be traced back to April 15th, 2018. You see, for all the talk there has been about how Morgan Jones coming over to Fear the Walking Dead ruined the series, justifiably so, I have seen almost no one talking about how the decision negatively impacted the main show. I understand that a lot of people weren't super big fans of Morgan's character and might have even been glad that he left. And I definitely had criticisms of how he was written in seasons 7 and 8 that I talked about in my rewrite videos. However, the fact remains that Morgan was still one of the most complex and interesting characters in the story. His role had been massively expanded from his comic book counterpart, where he was essentially a throwaway character that died unceremoniously when the Walker herd stormed the streets of Alexandria. The fact that Morgan, one of the most prominent characters in the story, who was an OG character that had been in the series since the very first episode, was just gone from the series forever, was unbelievably disappointing to me when it was announced. I mean, think about this for a second. Morgan is never there to witness the death of Rick Grimes, the person that he chose to save in episode 1 of the series, the person that his story was intrinsically tied to. Some of the absolute best scenes in the series are interactions between Morgan and Rick, like their conversation after slaughtering the Saviors in episode 14 of season 8.
You saved me, Morgan. You saved me. I would have died. Maybe on that street, right in front of your house. You didn't know me. Why'd you do it?
We should go.
Just tell me. Why'd you save me? You had your son there.
No.
You did.
Hey, no.
Why'd you save me? Why?
Because. Because my son was there.
Morgan could never hope to have a scene half as powerful as this in Fear the Walking Dead, because he doesn't have a real connection to any of the characters in that show. Morgan being moved over to Fear was an undisputed loss for the Walking Dead TV series. Think about the loss of so much potential of him still being in the story. Just think about how much harder the death of Henry at the hands of the Whisperers would have hit if Morgan was still in the show. Morgan, who was the most important character in Henry's story, but he is never there to witness the death of the kid who was integral to his motivations and character development in season 8. The wasted potential of Morgan was why, originally, when I was thinking of ideas for my rewrite of seasons 9 and 10 of The Walking Dead, Morgan was going to be an absolutely integral player in the story. He deserved to be. Think about this. What if, instead of Sadiq, a side character who isn't that important, being the one who makes the speech after the Pike scene, being the one suffering from PTSD and survivor's guilt after his kidnapping by the Whisperers, what if, instead, it was Morgan? It would make complete sense. Morgan is a character who was struggling to look for a chance to see the good in the world, who constantly suffered from mental health issues and survivor's guilt. Him being forced to watch people he cared about, and especially Henry, die right in front of him while being the only one to live? And then it would have made total sense that Dante tries to frame Morgan for weird stuff going wrong in Alexandria, because, Morgan has gone really crazy before, and there would be this lingering tension throughout season 10 with the audience wondering if he snapped again. I mean, it writes itself. It's so obvious that Morgan had the potential for such a bigger role in the ongoing Walking Dead story as the show moved on to the Whisperers arc. And we will never get to see that because of April 15th, 2018. And this, right here, is the biggest problem with seasons 9 to 11 of The Walking Dead. It's not what's in the last 3 seasons, it's what's not in the last 3 seasons. Characters are just missing from the story for no explicable reason. Because AMC didn't stop with just Morgan, oh no. The same fate ended up befalling Dwight, too. After becoming one of the best written characters in the show during season 8 of The Walking Dead, he just disappears and is never seen again. I mean, there is at least some more reason given than with Morgan, as Daryl told him to go look for his wife, and if he ever returned again, he would kill him. But that's still pretty contrived. And in the comics, Dwight continued to be a really important character going forward in the story. He became the new leader of the Savers after Negan was defeated, which made a lot more sense than Daryl, and he played a big role in the Commonwealth storyline, adding an element of internal tension to it that was lacking in the show adaptation. Obviously, Dwight's role couldn't have been the exact same as in the comics in the last 3 seasons, but he should have remained a prominent character in the show from season 9 onwards. But no, that would have just made too much sense. So instead, Dwight headed over to join season 2 of the Morgan Jones Show to become a terrible, boring character, involving himself with characters and storylines he has absolutely nothing to do with. Why? How? I mean, Morgan traveling all the way from Virginia to Texas during the zombie apocalypse and just happening to run into the cast from Fear the Walking Dead was already unbelievably contrived. But now you expect me to believe that Dwight also traveled all the way from Virginia to Texas and just happened to run into Morgan's new pals June and John? This didn't stretch my suspension of disbelief. It fucking snapped it straight in half. And then, of course, in season 6 of Fear, Dwight's wife Sherry also joins the cast of the series because why the fuck not, right? Instead of trying to actually write something good, we'll just bring characters from the more popular main show over to Fear and hope that people are desperate enough to find out what happened to them that they will slog through 5 seasons of fucking garbage. Who cares if it makes sense? Who cares if these characters' stories are intrinsically tied to the stories of the main show, which feels incomplete without them? Who cares, right? Say, recall how I was talking before about how a major problem with the Commonwealth storyline in the final season is that no one actually dies during the conflict, making the Commonwealth soldiers feel incredibly incompetent and not threatening at all? I mean, yes, technically Rosita died, but she is kind of a side character, and she died in the series finale from getting bit by a walker. For the much more expanded and high-stakes Commonwealth storyline written in the show as compared to the book, the Commonwealth needed to kill off at least one major character relatively early on to set the stakes. And you know who could have filled that role? Our Lord and Savior fucking Morgan! That's who! The only character left in the show who would have been around since the very first episode, once again saving the show's writing. Here, I'll set the scene. It's after Toby Carlson is revealed as an ex-CIA agent and starts slaughtering the group that Negan joined. Morgan went along with Aaron on the mission, thinking he was going to help people, but realizes that Toby is only there to clear. So he goes to try to stop him and ultimately ends up saving Negan's life, but dies in the process, finally ending his character arc by saving the person that Rick Grimes chose to spare, because he believed that there was something bigger to preserve after the war. Dwight could have also served as another major death in the Commonwealth arc. He died in the Commonwealth arc in the comics, and obviously things would have to be a little different considering the major story elements that were altered, but I'm not going to go into detail about a rewritten Dwight character arc and death after the war arc. I'm just pointing out how the lack of tension and sense of threat that was sucking the life out of The Walking Dead's final season can ultimately be traced back to the exit of Morgan and Dwight from the show. The show was hemorrhaging major legacy characters by the end of its run, and was simply unable or unwilling to write a truly impactful death scene like it had been able to do in the past. The last thing AMC needed to do was remove Morgan and Dwight from the series and move them over to Fear for no reason! Even though Dwight and Morgan were the only major characters from The Walking Dead that disappeared from the show between seasons 8 and 9 for no reason, they wouldn't be the last. Take Maggie, for instance. After the time skip at the end of episode 5 of season 9, Maggie does not appear at all until she randomly pops in again in the season 10B finale out of nowhere. She just randomly disappears for the flimsiest of reasons, the explanation being that she fucked off somewhere else to do something with Georgie, aka the most useless subplot introduced in season 8, which doesn't even amount to anything because she never appears again. And nearly all of the new characters that she brought with her when she came back into the story are just slaughtered by the Reapers anyway. There was no reason, story-wise, to have Maggie leave the show for 26 episodes to go on a pointless side quest. And Maggie is arguably an even more important character than Morgan and Dwight. She is every bit as prominent as Daryl, Carol, or Michonne. In the comics, she is pretty much the third most important character during the Whisperer arc, which makes sense because she is the leader of Hilltop, the place where the whole conflict starts. But in the show, she's just gone. She isn't there to react to her most trusted confidant, Jesus, dying. She isn't there to witness the horror of the heads on spikes. She isn't there to witness her own community being destroyed by the Whisperers. So much potential for emotional scenes that add to Maggie's character, a character who's been in the show since the second season, is completely wasted. And when Maggie reappears after the Whisperer plotline is basically done, her reintroduction is anything but seamless. It feels like she missed an entire multi-season arc with the most important events that happened to that point after the time skip, because, well, she did. And I get it, okay? Lauren Cohan wanted to leave to work on another project, but that doesn't mean it's still not a major problem with the show. But, I mean, I guess I should at least be thankful that Maggie wasn't also somehow whisked away to Texas to join the Morgan Jones show in its third season. I am at least somewhat forgiving of Maggie's temporary exit from the show, because even though it's terrible from a story perspective, it was somewhat unavoidable, and jarring or not, I still like that Maggie is actually present in the final season of the show, and her interactions with Negan are great. But seriously, stop trying to ship them. Why is this a thing? With that said, don't expect me to give any more good faith to AMC throughout the rest of this video, because now we have to talk about Rick Grimes. The news that Andrew Lincoln would be leaving The Walking Dead to move back to the UK and would only be appearing for 5 episodes of Season 9 was absolutely devastating for Walking Dead fans, including myself. For many, his exit only made the death of The Walking Dead official, as without him and without Carl, what was the point of even continuing to watch the show anymore? But here's the thing. Remember how I said before that Carl's death absolutely could have worked in Season 8 if it was done right? Yeah, Rick's death was done right. Andrew Lincoln's untimely exit from the show must have been an absolute headache for everyone involved in writing Season 9, which is why I have so much props for Angela Kang and the other writers, because although rushed, although out of left field, unlike Carl's death, Rick's death was a massive diversion from the comic books that I thought was written spectacularly, with so much respect. What Comes After was one of the best episodes in the show's run, and it was pretty much the most perfect send-off the show could have given Rick. I mean, except for Sasha randomly appearing to Rick in his hallucinations instead of, oh, I don't know, Carl or Glenn perhaps, but whatever. The episode was still really great, and honestly, the show was still capable of continuing on without him. You know, if it still had Morgan and Dwight in it anyway, but whatever, that's besides the point. Even though the show would miss out on some great stuff with Rick's character that happened in post-time skip in the comics, Rick's death also gave the series the chance to go in a fresh new direction, with a great ensemble cast being able to step up and survive in a post-Rick Grimes world. Except, not really, because it turns out Rick Grimes didn't even die, and he got saved by Jadis and taken away in a helicopter at the last minute, and are you fucking kidding me? You give a well-written, emotional, and satisfying conclusion that makes sense for the story to a character that fans have been attached to for 9 years, and then you fucking pussy out at the last minute? I mean, the episode is still great, but it just loses so much of its emotional impact when you know that Rick is still alive somewhere else doing random bullshit. A bunch of fans were speculating whether Rick would turn up at the Commonwealth at the end of Season 11, and were really excited to see him show up and reunite with everyone in the finale. But I wasn't. I'm glad he didn't. What would be the point? If Maggie disappearing for no reason and then reappearing was jarring and out of place, Rick just showing up at the end of the series to say hi to all of the characters and give his famous "We are not the Walking Dead" speech after being gone for 7 years in universe, missing every single major plot point that happened after he left, with everyone thinking he was dead, would have made for the most ridiculous, out-of-place, insulting finale ever. Rick should have just died in What Comes After. That would have been the best way to make the best of a bad situation. But he wasn't allowed to die, because he was going to get butts in the seat for those Rick Grimes movies that were a fucking terrible idea and no one should have ever been excited for. Seriously, everyone who is excited for the now cancelled Rick Grimes movie trilogy should have their heads examined. It would have run into the exact same problems as the Morgan Jones show. If you took Rick Grimes away from all the characters that actually matter to his story and plop him into a completely different story that has nothing to do with him, he would become boring! But Rick's disgusting money-milking treatment by AMC does not even compare to Michonne. Much like Andrew Lincoln and Lauren Cohan, Danai Gurira also wanted to leave The Walking Dead and would exit the show in Season 10. And the thing is, Unlike with Rick and Maggie, the writers had an absolutely perfect opportunity to give her character a graceful exit that would have also been comic book accurate. Because while Michonne does live to the end of the comic book run, Michonne's role in the comic is also pretty different from the show, as she is much more of a loner and never hooks up with Rick. Instead, Rick gets together with Andrea in the comics, who lives way longer and is a certified badass, unlike her depiction in the show. And in the comics, Andrea meets her end at the end of the Whisperers arc, in probably my favorite death in the comic series. As Beta leads the Walker mega herd to destroy the communities in vengeance, Andrea is desperately trying to protect Eugene from a swarm of walkers. Oh yeah, in the comics, Eugene is actually really important to the climax of the Whisper arc, as he makes a fuck ton of bullets that he risks his life to transport to Alexandria in order to save everyone. Unlike in the show, where Eugene is just off somewhere else at the end of the arc, setting up the next arc. Seriously, why you gotta do my man like that? He deserves more respect. But I digress. Back to the comic, Andrea manages to fight off all the walkers surrounding them, saving Eugene, but gets bit on her neck in the process. She knows she's done for, but uses the strength and time she has left to dedicate everything to stopping the walker horde and saving everyone. After the battle is over, Andrea is still alive, and before she dies, she has an extremely emotional conversation with Carl and Rick, and then there is this giant panel of all the characters getting to say their heartfelt farewells to her. Ultimately, Rick has to put her down. I left out a lot of details, but you really have to just go read it for yourself. Everything about the way Andrea's death is written in the comics just works so well, and is a fantastic end to such a great character. So, returning back to the show, it made all the sense in the world to give Michonne the same ending as comic book Andrea, if Danai Gurira was going to leave the series. She took over a lot of Andrea's role in the story, and she deserves to go out in such an incredibly badass way. Even though it wouldn't have been quite as impactful as Andrea's death in the comics, as Rick and Carl obviously aren't there, it still would have been incredibly emotional. Judith loses another parent, Andre is without a mother, and everyone whose lives that this much less closed-off TV Michonne has touched throughout the story have to say goodbye to her. Alexandria would be without its leader, with Father Gabriel taking the reins from her and Daryl ultimately being the one to put her down. A fitting and respectful end to such a great character that would surely weigh heavy on all the surviving characters going into the final season. So naturally, AMC said, fuck that, what we're actually going to do is give her a pointless bottle episode where she discovers evidence that Rick might still be alive, which causes her to abandon her daughter and everyone she cares about in the communities to fight for their lives against the Whisperers without ever even checking to see if they were okay, just to go on a wild goose chase to find someone she had accepted was dead for 7 years! At least Rick got a proper send-off from the show, even if he didn't actually die, and when he disappeared, he didn't have a choice. Michonne's exit not only robs the potential for an incredibly memorable and impactful final appearance, but necessitates that she make an incredibly selfish decision that is so out of character for her. And no, the fact that Judith lies to Michonne and says that the Whisperers were all defeated, and that she is fine with her leaving to go look for Rick, does not make it okay. First of all, she's fucking 10! What 10-year-old would encourage their mom to abandon them when there are masked killers roaming the countryside? Secondly, she's fucking 10! What self-respecting mother would abandon their 10-year-old child in any circumstance? Not to mention, Michonne is also leaving behind her even younger son, RJ, too. Is she just forgetting that her first son, Andre, died at the beginning of the apocalypse because she wasn't there to protect him? It makes no sense! This is the most disrespectful ending that the show possibly could have given Michonne. But who cares, right? Who cares that her character was completely ruined in the final appearance on the show? Because now that the Rick Grimes movies have been canceled, we have to set up the Rick and Michonne miniseries. We can't let Danai Gurira exit from the show with any dignity until we've squeezed out all the fan investment out of her character as possible. I mean, seriously, for all the people bitching and moaning about Carl's death in Season 8, at least the show still had the decency to actually kill him off. The characters could actually mourn him. At least Carl wasn't just yeeted out of the show, so he could bring over viewers to the new Carl Papa spin-off series, exclusive on AMC+.
Cause he's pretend bread boy, little cookie man, never waved to me, so he got knocked out, because I flow. The Jiggy Jar Jar dude.
Michonne's exit from the show is 10 times worse than Carl's ever was. So, can you see now why I said April 15th, 2018 was the day when The Walking Dead truly died? It's because April 15th, 2018 was when it became abundantly clear that AMC did not care about making anything of quality anymore. The network did not care if the Walking Dead franchise was actually producing good shows. Instead, the focus became setting up the Walking Dead cinematic universe, something that was never present in the comic books and should never have been a focus on this franchise. No character in The Walking Dead should ever have been moved to fear The Walking Dead. There was no reason for these shows to ever intersect, but AMC didn't care, and it didn't learn its lesson. Because then the network decided that there needed to be another Walking Dead spin-off. So World Beyond was released in 2020, set 10 years after the apocalypse, because of reasons. Oh wait, no, the reason is obvious. We need to focus more on the CRM and build them up in the Walking Dead universe, and we'll get a bunch of people to watch the show by having Jadis make an appearance, and get a bunch of people wondering if Rick Grimes is going to make a cameo. And then in the final season of The Walking Dead, we'll try to connect that series with The World Beyond by introducing the variant walkers out of nowhere in the 6th to last episode, despite them never being a focus of the show before. I never watched The Walking Dead World Beyond because the way AMC treated Fear the Walking Dead completely turned me off to the idea of any spin-off shows set in the Walking Dead universe. It was so obvious that World Beyond was just another soulless cash grab, and the reviews for the series definitely seemed to back me up on that assumption. But it couldn't just stop at The World Beyond. No, AMC must have more spin-off shows, much more. We got the Tales of the Walking Dead. We're gonna get Dead City airing today. Then we're gonna get the Daryl Dixon spin-off, and then the Rick and Michonne spin-off, and probably at least 3 others that haven't been announced yet. Why not, right? Endings are no fun. We should just make more and more and more content to add to this bloated, ridiculous excuse for a cinematic universe. And why?
We've got to have money.
God, I hate capitalism. But yeah, AMC's unrelenting greed trying to squeeze as much money as possible out of the franchise killed The Walking Dead. The network's insistence on setting up the Walking Dead cinematic universe killed The Walking Dead. I already talked about how terribly Rick and Michonne's exits from the show were handled due to the hunger for more spin-offs, but the spin-offs created even more problems than that. Negan, Maggie, Daryl, and Carol were basically the 4 main characters of Season 11, and right from the beginning, there was absolutely no tension because the audience knew all of them would be fine because they were supposed to move on to the spin-off shows after the series ended. And granted, I don't think any of those characters should have been killed off in the final season, but that's not the point. The point is the audience is not supposed to know what happens next in the story. They are supposed to be on the edge of their seat, wondering whether their favorite characters will make it out alive. But AMC didn't care about that, because the network was just so focused on getting enough excitement as possible for the upcoming spin-off series. Well, you know what? I don't care. I don't care about the Walking Dead cinematic universe. It's fucking stupid. And I am never going to watch any of the Walking Dead spin-off series. The way that you should try to get people invested in a spin-off series is by first and foremost making a good product, letting the quality of your production and writing shine through, and showcasing that you are capable of creating a series with a satisfying ending. People will want to watch more because you have made it clear that you actually care about creating a good story, and thus will be much less likely that any future spin-off show will just be a pointless cash grab. When AMC produced Breaking Bad, the network wasn't trying to set up 5 different spin-off shows at the same time the show was finishing airing. No, the show had a concise, contained, and satisfying story. And then when more spin-off stories were created in the Breaking Bad universe, like Better Call Saul and El Camino, they were actually good, because Vince Gilligan had more stories that he actually wanted to tell, not just because the network wanted to squeeze more money out of the franchise. But with AMC's other golden child, The Walking Dead, the network has given it no such respect. It's just its cash cow. Forget about bringing the series to an end with any kind of respect or decency. Forget about trying to focus as much attention and care as possible into making the final season as good as possible. I will not watch any of the upcoming Walking Dead spin-offs because the ending of The Walking Dead was not a good ending. Why would I want to keep watching more after being let down so thoroughly? So, yeah, let's finally talk about that ending. If you can even call it that, because the Walking Dead series finale, Rest in Peace, was not a real ending. It was a glorified trailer for the upcoming spin-off series. I may have had my problems with the Commonwealth story arc in the comic book, but Robert Kirkman wrote an actual ending for the series. He took his time writing a long-ass epilogue at the end of the story showing Carl and a lot of the other characters living their lives 20 years in the future, showing how much things have changed, how much things have improved, with the final panel showing a grown-up Carl reading a story to his daughter. The Walking Dead finale, meanwhile, has no such epilogue. It doesn't show Judith living a happy life 20 years in the future with her brother RJ, her husband Herschel, and her uncle Daryl, going to see everyone in their new lives and going to visit Negan. It's a slam dunk ending that would have made people cry like a bitch. But instead, we just got a bunch of characters saying, "We're the ones who live," at the end. That makes me feel nothing. It's just cheesy spin-off bait. But of course, having an ending that is similar to the ending of the comic book would have made too much sense and been too emotionally resonant. We can't possibly have a time skip like that, because then the audience might have actually been satisfied with the ending and not felt the need to watch our new spin-off series. No, of course, the last 5 minutes of the series finale have to be spent reminding the audience that Rick and Michonne are still alive and up to some wacky shenanigans, and you should really watch our upcoming miniseries if you want to find out what happened to them. And Judith loses yet another parental figure as Daryl leaves again to find Rick and Michonne, despite the fact that it makes no sense for his character arc. His whole journey was about finding and maintaining connections with other people in his life, and him deciding to stay and be in Judith's life would have been the perfect conclusion to that. But hey, we need to set up that Daryl spinoff, so who cares, right? Well, at least Judith still has Negan, right? Well, actually, no, because Negan is, of course, going off with Maggie in the Dead City spinoff, because why not, right? God, I feel bad for this kid. People just keep fucking leaving her. And listen, I'm not going to pretend like the Walking Dead series finale was complete garbage. There were still some things I liked in it, like the scene with the walkers raiding the hospital and Negan and Maggie's final conversation, but there were so many problems with it. Even with the finale cutting out the entire extended epilogue from the comics, it still felt incredibly rushed. It tried to cover the Walker attack on the Commonwealth, the resolution of the Milton storyline, the creation of the new government, and the setup for the Walking Dead spin-off series in only 1 hour, and it did not work very well. There are so many oversights and mistakes in this finale. I mean, for crying out loud, Lydia gets her arm cut off and Judith gets shot, and they basically look fine a few hours later. Lydia even grows back her arm so she can hug Judith near the end. How did nobody catch this? And oh yeah, remember Negan's new wife and her people that became an important part of this version of the Commonwealth storyline? Well, we never see them again. Oceanside, we never see them again. I guess Hornsby just killed them all after episode 16. Fucking fantastic. It is so obvious that the production of the final episode was rushed through by the executives at AMC without giving the writers the proper time or the proper amount of episodes to wrap things up, which doesn't even make any sense because the show wasted 9 episodes at the beginning of the season focusing on the Reaper story arc, while the actual ending stretch of the Commonwealth arc was jammed into a single episode that should have been at least 3. The ending of The Walking Dead could have been so much better in so many ways, but it wasn't allowed to be better. It wasn't allowed to have a satisfying conclusion. It wasn't allowed to take the time it needed because AMC did not care. The network ceased to care about making The Walking Dead a good show, and that has been obvious ever since April 15th, 2018, the day The Walking Dead died. So really, is it a surprise that the show had a bad ending? Is it a surprise that despite clear effort from the writers, that season 11 of the show is arguably the worst season? No, I don't think it is. And it's all because of those goddamn stupid motherfucking spinoffs. So will it be worth it in the end? Will Dead City and the Daryl Dixon Show and the Rick and Michonne miniseries end up being really great and totally justify AMC's disgraceful treatment of the franchise for the past 5 years? Of course they won't. And the reason why goes beyond the fact that AMC has given me zero confidence in its ability to care about quality storytelling. It's because the premises for these spin-offs are inherently flawed. The central theme of the Walking Dead series around which the show is based is found family and community. The show is centered around a cast of characters from all different walks of life who are forced by their situation to form strong bonds with the people around them, not just to survive, but to live. The relationships and interactions between the characters is what gives the show life. It's what makes the show interesting. Moments like the snowball fight between Daryl and Judith at the end of Season 9 give the series its heart. So the issue is that when you try to pull any of the characters away from their natural place in the story with the other characters that they have meaningful relationships with, they immediately become much less interesting characters. Sometimes solo bottle episodes with one or two characters on their own can work, like with Here's Not Here or Here's Negan, but one or two characters cannot carry a series by themselves without the rest of the cast to work off of. That was made abundantly clear with Morgan's entry into Fear the Walking Dead. Together, the Walking Dead cast becomes more than the sum of their parts, but off on their own, they become boring, stale. There is no investment anymore. AMC just assumes people will care about these iconic characters and will tune in to watch them while having no understanding of why we care about them in the first place. You really expect a Daryl Dixon spinoff to work when his explicit role in The Walking Dead was always that of a protector and right-hand man. His character was never meant for a leading role. But it's not just Daryl. I don't have confidence a show centered around Maggie and Negan would work, separated from the rest of the cast. I don't have confidence that Rick and Michonne's show would work, separated from the rest of the cast. I am not watching these shows because I have no interest in their premises. I never wanted any of these spin-offs. I just wanted the show and the story that I was attached to have a satisfying and well-written conclusion, and it didn't. So fuck you, AMC. I'm not falling for the sunk cost fallacy. I'm not sinking hours upon hours more of my life into these cash grabs in the hopes of one day maybe getting a satisfying ending to The Walking Dead story and characters. The Walking Dead is over, and it already failed at that. So I'm done. So yeah, that was the video essay, or more accurately, scripted rant. I really just wanted to get all of my anger at AMC's treatment of the show in its final seasons off my chest, because it was just downright awful. And I really think that people who are excited for the future of the franchise and think it will be good are just huffing copium, to be honest. But you know, if you have your own thoughts about the conclusion of The Walking Dead, please leave them down in the comments below. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. This has been the Aromantic Shipper. And as always, remember, just because you can't feel loved doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye.